start our committee meeting on planning for the interim. And I think you've all had the opportunity to submit interim topics. I thought we'd go through them and try to get a better understanding of these topics. Would that be your desire, Mr. Co-Chairman?
Sure.
Okay, and maybe let folks in the audience want to speak on them if they want. So just start at the beginning and try to get through them. Senate has to go in at 2 o'clock, so just letting everybody know. First topic, property tax relief. Dan Dockstader, I've heard of him. So property taxes are increasing, expect to find a proper balance for good people. Any discussion? Anybody want to talk about that one? Anybody? Okay, the next one, Representative Harshman, you're listed as investigate new sources of revenue for K-12. Floor is yours.
Well, we've made tremendous progress, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. You know, just a few short years ago, the biennial operations deficit was approaching 500 million. It's right at about 65 now per year. So about 130 million in operations. So we've made significant progress as a legislature in a lot of different fronts, from investment income to royalty income to actually just filling reserve accounts and taking away some of the paper deficit. But I think, as we know, we're like every other state, we fund education primarily through property taxes. And the only ones really paying significant property tax are mineral companies, paying at 100% valuation. And so, and we've done, our LSO has done studies so that, you know, of all the government services, corrections, health, education, family services, the number one most volatile service we have is K-12 education, because it's based on a volatile revenue stream. And so the idea is just to kind of maybe look at some of these possibilities and not talk about raising taxes in other areas, but are there things we're missing out on? Are there new things coming that we can look at? And I don't know. So that's really where I'm going at for a little brainstorming. We're not going to pass any tax bills. I mean, we don't need to, and we're not going to talk about many of them. I don't think, you know, but I think continuing cleaning up, educating, and then a little investigation piece here. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Anybody else? Senator James?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think this one, and in combination with yours, further back on page 10, review of governmental tax exemptions, I think that'd be a good combination to place together. And then also we should probably take a look at education having a spending problem instead of a revenue problem. And because there's a lot of areas in there where we're spending far too much when we don't need to be. For instance, when we have every single superintendent making more than the state superintendent, that's kind of an issue. The buildings that we spend money on, I remember when I was in school, I was lucky if I had a window. We have the cube buildings. We should not be building these exotic building schools for kids. Instead, we should be funding from the bottom up instead of the top down. So I think we should, you know, maybe combine Senator cases or Chairman cases with this one and look at the spending issue.
Thank you, Senator James. Anybody else? Anybody in the audience? Okay, the next one for our consideration is senior property tax relief programs. Senator Lynn Hutchings. Is Senator Hutchings here? Don't see her. Anybody want to present her topic? Kind of goes with Dockstader's and the constitutional amendment that's working its way through your side, isn't it?
Died.
It died. Oh, okay. Gee, I thought it was still alive. Okay. Well, does anybody on the committee want to speak? Anybody in the audience?
No, I think,
Mr. Chairman.
I think it's important for those folks who are here and watching. We reinstituted funding for the property tax relief program. We have 2 of them in statute, one administered by the Department of Health, one I think that the legislature has generally chosen to fund is administered by the Department of Revenue. And so when our crisis hit, you know, spring of 16, going into all that budget work, that was unfortunately reduced. So, but we've been able to fund that again. And I think that's an important deal. And it's will be well utilized across our state for folks who are on the margins of, you know, stay in their homes. So Anyway, I just want people to know that. It's not like we're not doing it. We've really acted on that, and I think we'll continue to. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ellis, would you like to tell us about the Gaming Commission stuff? Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am bringing to you a request for the Revenue Committee to take up oversight jurisdiction over the Gaming Commission. As you know, there's been significant advances in our gaming industry in Wyoming in the past few years. And it has landed in the TRW committee. And as I've worked on this issue and have looked at a number of issues where I think we could make some improvement on those laws and provide a really strong regulatory structure. At the end of the day, Mr. Co-Chairs, I do think that looking at how other states tackle it, the Department of Revenue tends to have a much more robust presence and role in how gaming is regulated. And so if I were to keep this topic in TRW, I think it would naturally start evolving into a discussion about the involvement of the Department of Revenue. And that just doesn't seem like a good fit for your TRW committee. So I would ask that the committee take this up. We have a number of things happening, rulemaking that's been done on the sports betting issue. If you visit with your appropriators, particularly on House appropriations, I think there's some questions about how we need to maybe clarify our intent on some areas of the law. I'd say that similarly, that's my experience with the skill games. But overall, I do think that the promise in the discussion of gaming tends to be one about revenue. You know, TRW tends to be more about outdoor recreation, promoting tourism. I don't think that we brought the gaming discussion to Wyoming hoping to, you know, market those opportunities. I think it's always been more of a what kind of revenue generation will this provide to the state? So with that, I can get into the weeds in a much more thorough way. But I would offer to the committee that, you know, I have worked a lot on this. I would happily be a resource and get you up to speed. And I highlight areas where I think we need to clarify the law. But ultimately, I do think that our gaming commission needs more oversight and being housed within the Department of Revenue.
Thank you, Senator. Questions for Senator Ellis? Any questions? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we had quite a lengthy discussion a couple days ago about this with our TRW committee. And I think the majority, felt like this was probably something that we needed to pass off. I know it'll take a little bit of time to get the structure changed, and it's not that we don't care about it. We just feel like it is a revenue bill. I mean, a revenue situation rather than TRW. And so I just wanted to let you know that the majority of the folks over there, I think, feel like this is where it needs to go, is with us.
Yeah, and we took a poll on like new taxes, and we thought maybe TRW could handle that. All right, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Senator Case. Chairman Ellis, not trying to put you on the spot here. So if you want to have a conversation in another spot more in detail, but I am curious. I mean, overall, is that the main 30,000 foot up change? I mean, I know you're talking about the statutes, but structurally that you think it should be under the Department of Revenue. Are there other 30,000 foot up structural changes that you've studied in other states?
Senator Ellis.
Mr. Chairman, I think the gaming situation is unique. You know, we started horse racing, I believe, in the 1930s, which created the Parimutuel Commission. And then in the last few years, in 2013, we added historic horse racing machines. I'll tell you this right now, and this is something that concerns me. Right now, we're writing rules for skill games, and they look something like this. Okay, your sports betting looks something like this, about 40 pages. If you look at the Parimutuel Commission since the 1960s, this is what the rules look like. They're robust. You can look in here and see how we treat horses, jockeys, racetrack conditions. It's very thorough rules. My concern is this: if you dig into the weeds, there are about 2 pages in here when it comes to the actual machines. And this is a significant source of revenue and dollars flying around our state. So I think more work needs to be done in making sure that, you know, I know the commission does a number of things by directive. I think that the Wyoming gaming industry would be better served by having clear rules that are out there. That might require looking at what the statutory structure needs to look like. But ultimately, you know, when we set up the Wyoming lottery a number of years ago, we put in a lot of parameters that say if you're going to be on the lottery board or work for the lottery, you have to do a background check. You can't have any financial interest, those kind of basic parameters that you see in gaming commissions nationwide. We don't have those parameters right now in our gaming commission. And it's a little alarming. So I think there are good people on the commission. I think there are good gaming operators, but it takes one bad decision by someone involved in one of those entities that will make the whole industry look bad. And so we do need to be vigilant to protect those people that are volunteering their time on these commissions and serving for that entity and operating good gaming and having good gaming practices. Clear rules protect that. Lack of rules don't. And so that's my concern. And like I said, if this doesn't move to revenue, TRW can keep trying to take it on, but I think it's going to create tension because nationally, I think most fit within Department of Revenue.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else? Anybody in the audience want to comment on this? Mr. Otokoven, welcome.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Byron Odekoven, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. Rising in support of the discussion. Not sure where we're going to end up, but would look forward to contributing, researching, explaining some of what we know that happens in other states and providing some of that guidance for you for research as well. We have taken, as was described, our toe foothold into gaming, we've kind of stumbled into, so to speak, when you look at, and I brought two TRW rules, as was mentioned, from other states. We talked about our neighboring states and other states talking about the rules, the robust nature of the rules, some of the things that we probably need to institute to make sure that we are looking out for both our citizens and our operators and our establishments, all three. And that process, while gaming's out of the horse, so to speak, or the horse has already left, we need to make sure that we follow up with proper statutes, proper rules, proper procedures to ensure and protect all three of those and the citizens of Wyoming, because this is a significant revenue stream both ways. Need to ensure that everybody's doing it by the numbers and as they should be, Mr. Chairman. So
Thank you.
happy to help.
Any questions for Mr. Otokoven? Go ahead, Senator Baker. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Otokoven, you say stumbled, I say tricked. We got tricked into this whole thing, in my opinion, but the history, I think, is illustrative of the lack of, regulations and the 2 pages that we have. I think that this absolutely needs to be addressed, but do you feel like more regulation will invite more of the industry into the state? Just curious.
Mr. Otokoven.
Mr. Chairman, candidly, I'm not sure why we don't have more in the state now based upon the wording in some of our regulations and the statute. I've been told that based on the wording, not sure why we don't have casinos now. Just because the statute is not clear enough that would prohibit that, or that it would be under the purview to allow it. I think were we a larger state with a greater population and thus a greater potential for return on investment, I think we would have lots of things based on our current statute. And if we don't put a stop to that, so to speak, or provide some clarification, I think the potential for the future is exactly as you described. I think we could have quite a bit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Otokoven. Looking around, anybody else want to jump in? We got a big deal. We're just plowing forward, so not seeing anybody. Next topic for our consideration is, this is always good. We went from gaming to liquor. So dissolution of the state liquor department, Representative Brown had proposed this. I think maybe you had a bill. Anybody on the committee want to speak to it?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Gray.
he had approached me and he submitted it, but I said I would maybe say a couple things. He just wants to study moving to just the models of other states and not having the warehouse. I mean, that's, I think, part of it. He sees that middleman as the wrong way to go. Maybe, I don't want to speak for him, but he wants us to just study other states. And I think it's certainly something for us to discuss taking on. I mean, there's a lot of interesting ones, very interesting too. So anyway.
Anybody else? Anybody else out there? Mr. Mosier, can you find your way up here? Sounded just like Charlie Scott, a little tiny Charlie Scott.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association, asking that we don't look at this, not that I don't want to see y'all during the summer and fall, because I will anyway. However, this is a solution desperately seeking a problem. There are over 1,400 retailers out there, and not one in the last years, decades has asked for this. The first study that was really done in this was 1995. It's actually my first issue that I ever worked with the Wyoming legislature. And Governor Geringer had tasked the Department of Revenue Director, Johnny Burton, to look at privatization. And Johnny did an incredibly thorough job and discovered that even though it may not seem like it at first, this system, especially for a rural state, works remarkably well. Now, the discussions with states that are looking at privatization, and there's only one that has recently, there's 17, I believe, control states that control alcohol at one level. But most of those states, the problem is as you know, there's a three-tiered system: manufacturer, wholesaler, and retailer. In most of those states, they control both wholesale and retail tier. So if you've ever been in Utah or Idaho, for example, you go to a state store to buy packaged liquor. Wyoming is an elegant in between, where we have one warehouse, about 50 employees, that distributes alcohol all of the state of Wyoming. In fact, if you're a rancher ordering barbed wire and Grable, you rely on that trucking system because we all know that that truck is going to Grable with liquor the next day. And so it works for all Wyomingites. The other concern is by privatization, you're dropping almost 20, well, what's approaching be $20 million a year to the general fund that's made not in taxes, but off the profit of the wholesale markup. Now, Washington State, which is the only state I know of that's done privatization in recent history, and my friends back there can back me up on this, they went from a pretty low tax state to the highest alcohol taxes in the United States because they needed to make up the financial shortfall. This is a system that works for small retailers in particular. I can bore you to death about all the other things, but it works for small retailers in particular. We can order anything in the planet, or almost anything in the planet, through the special order system, reasonable price, transparency, and quick delivery. And so if you want to talk about it, that's fine, but nobody's asking for this, especially from my side. And so I would ask that you focus on something a little more pressing besides something that works with so many small businesses. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. Questions for Mr. Moser? Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Moser, so this kind of puts the state in a monopoly type situation where we control the distribution. And I believe that's against our Constitution. And then also too, we recently just had an issue with ordering. And so when you have one entity handling all the distribution and something goes wrong, everybody's affected. And so having it privatized where more people and more companies can be involved, one incident won't affect everyone. And so, I mean, I think the look at privatization would be a really good idea. Also, in looking at the non-liquor control states, they seem to be making more money than the control states from the research I've done, because this came up in management audit regarding the liquor distribution issue. So, yeah, I mean, while this may not be a huge revenue thing, and maybe not this interim, maybe at some point, but I think this is definitely something that we should be looking at.
Mr. Chairman, Senator James, I would suggest looking at the total dollars brought in by the sale of alcohol. If you look at taxes alone, we are low. But part of the reason we're able to keep our taxes low is because we make so much money off the wholesale markup, which is where the bulk of it is. Also, yes, we had computer problems at the liquor division. You all have, I'm sure, heard of it. It got fixed. It's getting fixed. If it was a private wholesaler, it gets fixed whenever they feel like it. I mean, the actions the Department of Revenue has taken to get this remedied. If it's a private wholesaler, Senator James, they probably aren't even going to be in Wyoming. If you're in Cheyenne or Casper, those trucks are probably coming from Denver. And so in this particular case, yeah, there were problems, but what are the remarkable things about all the, trust me, I spent a huge amount of time on the phone with retailers over this. Not one ever said we should privatize. A lot of them would like to go burn that program down with their own torch, the computer program, but nobody suggested privatization. It really does work well for everybody. Part of it, like I said, was small retailers. Large retailers would, in a privatized system, buy at a cheaper price because of bulk, and your mom and pops are going to suffer because of it. So that being said, it's up to you. I'm going to see anyway. So if you want to put it on, fine. And if not, I'll see anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. We got a lot to cover today, you guys, so I think that.
Thank you,
covers
Mr. Chairman.
the gist of it, so thank you. Next one is review of the State Board of Equalization. We have Chairman Mockler is here. Guys, Chairman Mockler and I started in this man's army at the same time. We were classmates in 1993.
Okay, 29 years ago.
That was a good year.
What did you say?
That was a good year.
Oh, I was gonna say, it was like a long time ago. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Board of Equalization just brought a few issues to your, basically for your review. A lot of them are coming out of the work you did last year, working with the caseloads, with the questions that you've had, Representative Gray. Some of them are old friends to this committee, the statement of consideration. As I said, once you have purview over what the board does, you're supposed to keep track. So we thought we would offer a few of the things that have been issues that we've seen. We have a Supreme Court opinion that told us what we can and can't look at in a case, and it's left over from a remnant of the statutes we wanted you to maybe look at. We have an investigation authority, which came up a lot with the Natrona County cases, where taxpayers were just very, very disappointed in how the assessor worked. And we have an investigation authority, but it's so narrowly defined that we weren't really able, I think, to address the issues that the taxpayers raised. And so we thought maybe look at that statute and really give us a sense of what authority you want us to have when we go back and look at how an assessor's working. And then the other one is the county boards of equalization. And I think you had a bill before you this year that addressed what can the county board do when they find for the taxpayer? Can they tell the assessor to change the tax? Well, right now we can't. We can't tell in one of our opinions that the tax should be X, and the county board can't say the tax should be X. And so we thought maybe you might want to explore how you want those opinions, what the authority is that you want to have us and the county boards be able to do with respect going back to the assessor to look at valuations. And that's it.
Questions?
Unless you wanted a really, really long how our statistician works discussion.
I suspect not at this time.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we don't have a ton of time, but I would like to understand the way this works in statute. If the state board sides with the taxpayer, you can only remand it back to the assessor. If they fail to do anything, what happens then? I mean, can they just run out the clock and every time it's remanded? I understand with the county board, when it's remanded, they can send it straight to you, but if you send it back to them, remand it, and they fail to do anything, what happens then? Thank you.
Well, when we have the
Chairman Mock.
appeal, oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I forget that part. You think I would remember. When we have the appeal, we send it back to the county board, and the county board sends it back to the assessor. And I think what we're really looking at is how explicit we can be when we tell them, look at a specific thing. You know, if for instance, you didn't look at the SOCs, we tell you to go back and look at the SOCs, but I think that gets lost in the translation. And that is a huge problem. I agree with you that a county assessor can simply say, I looked at it again, I'm right. And then the taxpayer's left kind of
They're
like,
mad.
well, what do we do now? Yeah, the taxpayer's mad, but it doesn't solve our issue either, because we're telling you as the appeal board to tell the county board to go back to the assessor and say, look at this specific issue. And we think you all deserve to have a better discussion of what authority do you want a county board to have? What authority do you want us to have when we tell an assessor to fix something?
Okay, anybody else?
That's pretty basic, Mr. Chairman.
Gotcha. Anybody else? Are you envisioning you kind of have an opening, talk about your problems day, and then we take it from
Right.
there?
Yeah.
Would that be like half of a day, a quarter of a day?
I would think so, especially, Mr. Chairman, if we know what's coming, we can get you that information and get, some research information
Mhm.
to you ahead of time.
I think you could probably count on working with it. Representative Sweeney.
Mr. Chairman, I think also on this issue, we've got to involve the county.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a critical piece. And personally, I don't want to hear from the assessors again, but we definitely need the county boards of equalization. So.
Okay. You're absolutely right. Need to involve the counties. Thank you. Anybody else on this topic? Thank you, Chairman Mockler. Okay, next one I've got is Tax evasion? I'm big on tax evasion. Ms. Lowe, would you please tell us how you're evading your taxes? Well, I'm not in the money category that these guys are that you're talking about. Go ahead, Ms. Lowe. Green light, look for a green light.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. Thank you so much for having me here today and for taking the time to listen. Jennifer Lowe, Equality State Policy Center. So last year, there was an article in the Washington Post that described a cowboy cocktail, which is a way for folks to stash their money in this state, keep it hidden, and evade paying taxes. I'm not sure if that's benefiting the folks that live here, the working Wyomingites that spend time doing what they have to do to put food on their table, take care of their families. Doesn't make sense to me that there are folks and potentially bad actors that are taking advantage of our tax laws. So my request is that you perhaps revisit the LLC and LLP regulations that were created in the 70s to see if they're still serving our state.
So these also are, Ms. Lowe, these are some interesting trusts that have been, they're not limited liability partnership necessarily or a limited liability company. They can be trusts. A lot of the Minerals Committee has worked on some trust legislation quite a bit. I don't know if there's any cross people on that, but how do we get at the trust and how does it fit with everything else? I think is part of this. Would you agree?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I do. And I think most of the trusts that you will see in the state are located in one specific county. And I think that that county could potentially benefit from the folks that are employed by the trusts. But other than that, I'm not sure what benefit they offer to the state.
Mhm. So everybody, corporations pay a corporate tax to the Secretary of State's office. It's based on your assets employed in Wyoming. There's no such equivalent kind of tax for trusts or anything like that. So, but looking down, I saw Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to expand that a little bit that, as you just said, that these large trusts are really important. I mean, they're in our state right now, and I think that Wyoming knows very little about how they're operated. And now it's a national issue with the privacy of these and who maybe is holding these trusts. And I think we just need to learn more about it. It's also a possibility of economic diversity for us.
Mhm.
And I just think it's really important that we do look at this, the issue of large trusts, domiciling in Wyoming.
Got it. Anybody else? Representative Sweeney, conscious of time, all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you think this is in Revenues Committee's wheelhouse versus minerals or corporations?
I honestly don't know. I think we have interest in it, potentially. Especially if we were to attempt to get more revenue for the state of Wyoming from these trusts somehow. I'm not saying tax them out of existence, but it's a valuable service to these entities to be here in Wyoming. For example, we had a bill, Representative Roscoe and I had a bill about insurance payouts for very, very large insurance policies that they would let them, it would be life insurance and it tweaked when the benefits had to be paid out and also what the insurance assets could be held in. They could be real property, for example. But the nice thing about that is that there's a premium tax that we collect on that for insurance purposes. So, but it's all kind of tied in together and I think this would be a good committee. I don't think there's going to be a lot of tax stuff, but maybe not. Representative Roscoe.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So going back to that large policy insurance issue is that we are competing with other states for that.
Yeah.
So we just need to know more about it so we can be competitive and open about the whole thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I would suspect, Ms. Lowe, that we would approach this, should we decide to, that it would be kind of a educational, maybe a quarter of a day to learn, and then from there, see where it goes. Would that be something? We'll think about it in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We appreciate you bringing it. Anybody else on this topic? All you trust fund babies out there? Okay. Next topic is tax exemptions. Representative Sherwood had proposed this. It fits with some of our other bills that we tabled last year regarding tax exemptions. So we know about tax exemptions and we know that we have a lot of them, right? So probably wouldn't hurt to keep trying to move those, unless you just don't think it's worth it. So anybody want to address this on tax exemptions? All right, the next one, Mr. Co-Chairman, Financial Trusteeship of State Lands.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we have a lot of state lands and some of them are incredibly valuable. Some are the most valuable pieces of land in the entire world. And I think if anything, I think we learn about it a little bit and what our return is and what our possibilities are. And no way selling them, not talking about any of that, but or again, the value, because constitutionally we're charged to get the highest rate of return and value from them. So it'd be good, I think, just to learn a little bit more about it.
Members of the committee, for example, just to tag on this a little bit, there's a school section that's on the way to the ski area, leaving between Wilson and the ski area. And if it's on the north side of the road, it's used for grazing, and there's a gravel operation there. There used to be, I think they cleaned that gravel. That school section, it's worth maybe $100 million. And it's leased under a grazing arrangement, which is, and I was involved one time in an analysis to see what the state could do with that school section. It's very important to the communities in Teton County for open space. They love it, but that open space, they get that for free, and our school children get the grazing revenue, and it's worth a lot of money. So I think that's one example. There are others. And there's some all around the state now that we've got these new developing areas. And I'm with the chairman. I don't want to sell. I'm not advocating selling it, but there has got to be a way to monetize some of this. Okay, that's a good one. Anybody want to address that? Anybody else? Did I cut you off? Ms. Harriman, of course, from the school boards. Thank you.
Thank you, committee, Mr. Chairman, Marguerite Herman, and I'm here wearing my hat is for the Advocates for School Trust Lands, which is a national group that concentrated on Western states, which are the only ones who still have trust lands left from joining the union. So just speaking really briefly in favor of the idea of looking at revenue potential of our school trust sections, preserving their ability to make money, and then ways to make money that are maybe a little innovative, not what we've seen before. I think it's time to look at those. We do it occasionally, and then usually someone says, no, not now, not mine. And so I think it's good to take just well, first of all, it's good to educate everybody on school trust sections, because it is, people get it mixed up with public land, and which is not. But I think that every once in a while, take a look at the revenue potential, because we're always trying to get an ongoing revenue source for schools. And I don't think we exploit this source of revenue enough. We're sort of traditional and hidebound, and that's good, but I think it's time to look at things that are a little innovative, what other states have done successfully, maybe learn from their mistakes, learn from their successes. And I will just say, the Office of State Lands and Investments is a very highly qualified professional group of people who can help you explore that. And I think it's worth at least finding out. You may not like any of the ideas, but it's worth finding out what they are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions? Representative Yen.
Mr. Chairman, not a question, just a statement on the topic.
Okay.
I think my county has not all of the state trust lands, just the ones that get all of the attention.
Mhm.
However, I think this is something that we should look at, but I want to make sure that, the committee takes a balanced look at the approach and not put things that don't really fit in the community. I don't really want to see slot machines on that state trust land. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gotcha. Anybody else? All right, next topic is study ad valorem rates on second homes. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, and I just, the only reason I bring this is really that through conversations with a friend about this issue who purchased a second home in another state and was surprised about that. And so I got looking into it a little more and just wanted to kind of see what other states are doing. And I would think it'd be more of just a learning thing of an hour or so report. Our staff can pull something from, our organizations and just see what that even looks like. I don't mean.
So, Mr. Coachman, are there other states that treat second homes differently than the primary home?
Absolutely.
There are.
Yeah.
Okay.
My understanding. So, but I don't know how many are.
Okay, we can
all
look into
kind of
that.
thing. What
Anybody
was it?
else? Representative Yan?
Mr. Chairman, all I want to say, this is my favorite topic of the bunch. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Your favorite. Anybody out there? Anybody else? All right, moving on. Special Municipal Taxing Authority, Scott Heiner from the Wyoming House. Anybody know anything about this that they could bring it forward? Anybody on the committee? Anybody out there?
It's the same. I think it's the same bill. Change those boundaries, I think, and he might have some different. But
Is that what it is?
I'm assuming.
Okay. Do we need to discuss it? Representative Gray, property tax problems.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was trying to come up with a catchy title there. I think the only thing that we haven't talked about, the property tax limit, which I'm not sure would have the support here, but is the acquisition value idea and studying that at length, which was a bill that came out of the Revenue Committee in the House. It wasn't heard in Committee of the Whole. And, as a member that is not here right now, but he's pretty passionate on it. I think it's a good thing for us to look at too. So, yeah, thank you.
Anyway, so it did come out of the Revenue Committee in the House?
Yes.
Okay, it's good to know. All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? Okay, thank you, Representative Gray. Cash-based budget development. Representative Gray, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, there's a lot of debate on this one, on what committee should be looking at this. I personally kind of came out that it should be a joint effort by the Revenue and Appropriations Committees. I don't think it should just be appropriations. I know there's one bill I saw that ended with a cap fin. I definitely don't think that's appropriate, but I know the bill failed or it wasn't heard in Committee of the Whole. I know it's in the budget. Not sure what the committee was on the budget amendment. I think that it should be a joint effort of the Revenue and Appropriations Committee though. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? I think you were a co-sponsor. I was a co-sponsor, so.
I think the budget amendment, is cap in. I'm looking at our staff. Give me the yes nod on that. No, we talked about it this morning in our cap and similar meeting.
So maybe we could at least pay attention to what's happening in CapFin and see, get their materials. Take it from there. Okay, Representative Harshman, you're up on pharmacy. Oh, the PBM bill. Did I skip?
I don't think I am.
Maybe you're under the cash-based budget. Maybe that's why that is. Anyway,
No,
pharmacy
maybe I
benefit
am.
manager practices, Camelia Hancock. Is Ms. Hancock here?
She's not here, Mr. Chairman.
The chairman of Senate Labor Health, welcome.
I've heard of him. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I didn't know this was ending up on Revenue Committee's chart, but I know that we've talked with corporations. This is a bill you're all very familiar with. You heard lots about this, your House Bill 36. We spent literally hundreds of hours in Labor and Health on this. Thought it was set for a new time for a new set of eyes. It's a complicated, complex issue. Corporations, frankly, probably would deal with it better than anyone. It deals with a lot of corporation issues. This is top-down vertical integration, but it needs a new set of eyes. It needs somebody new. So I don't know that it belongs on this committee necessarily, but I believe corporations talked about it in their interim meeting yesterday or day before, and I believe they've agreed to accept this one. So should they not accept it, feel free to take it, but don't put me on the subcommittee.
I think that's accurate. Anybody? Can we leave it in their bailiwick for now? Okay. Mr. Mosier's shaking his head up and down. This next one is from WHAM. I'm sponsoring Local Government Revenue Alternatives. Yes, sir. Come on up. Welcome. Welcome to.
Chairman, committee member Kelly Crickle, Mayor of Town Alban. I'm here on behalf of the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. I'm here mostly just to answer questions, but our big push is if there's any way we can get an adequate, sustainable funding model for direct distribution and streamline that, so the governor and legislature don't have to debate on that dollar amount and which fund that's coming out every year. We appreciate it greatly if we can figure out a way to work with you and do that. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Who has that? Representative Hendrickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're from Alban, you said?
Yep.
All right, so any ideas on how to help a small town in Wyoming with revenue issues?
Go ahead,
that's-
Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, the problem is, the small towns don't have a way to generate a lot of revenue. That's why we rely heavily on the state sales tax for funding. One of the things we might have you look at is tweaking the distribution on the sales tax, that percentage. Maybe we get a little more of that to cities, towns, and even counties. So, but like I said, it's pretty hard for us, especially in today's economy, to get things up and growing. So
You guys talked about the food tax repeal?
we always bring that up, but as you well know, that's not a big high priority for the legislature, it seems like. So,
But it still is with Wham, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
Or at least replace that funding that was supposed to be done. So
Right.
that would be helpful too, any way we can. And we're happy to work with you, the association, on finding different ways we can possibly get this to work.
So committee, just remember that cities and towns get 8 mills. The counties can assess 25 mills, including mills from where the cities are, with respect to sales tax, cities are much more dependent on sales taxes than counties are. So Representative James, or Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this one might actually be good, except for we might want to also look at the expenditures of local governments as well. Because I know at least in my neck of the woods, there's quite a few expenditures that shouldn't be there and be more appropriate under private sector and are a constant and yearly loss of millions of dollars. So, while we look at revenues, we also should probably look at expenditures. Do you think that would be appropriate as well?
Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator, yeah, I mean, like I said, we can do a lot of different discussions if you guys are willing to take this on.
Mr. Mayor, do you feel like your town's wasting a lot of money?
No, in fact, we're probably pretty short on what we offer our employees and different stuff compared to a lot of them, so. But and one thing of it is, a lot of you probably seen a finance report that the association put out. A lot of the new ones haven't. It's been about 4 or 5 years. That's one of our goals, to get that up and running, and that'll show you what a lot of the needs are for cities and towns and where that money's going. So that might help everybody out too, so.
Okay. Representative Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So not to say that you are wasting any money, but do you happen to have any employees on the payroll that are actually in the private sector, like plumbers, electricians, HVAC, maintenance, that type of stuff that would be, something they could contract out, and then that way that would save money in the benefits area, the vacation, all that type of thing. So, I mean, do you have employees like that?
ahead,
Mr.
Mayor.
Chairman, Senator, no, we don't at this time, so.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr.
Thank
Fraser,
you.
did you want anything? Got it covered? Okay. We've gone from municipalities to premium cigars. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just so you know, I don't smoke. I'm not super into, so, it's an interesting thing, but I had a constituent reach out to me who owns one of the cigar shops in our state. He's actually with the competitor radio station group since the mid-90s. I've known him a long time and is a constituent. And I think they're on the Zoom to present on this topic. 15 states have the way these taxes aggregate. I understand it's particularly negative for premium cigar tellers, and 15 states have this cap in place. So it's kind of for our small businesses. And if I know I didn't get a chance to talk to you, I talked to the other chairman about allowing Zoom testimony.
I'm fine with it. We just,
Okay. Yeah.
we're just
time.
under this time constraint. So
Right.
would you introduce your witness?
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Donovan Short, he owns the shop in there in Casper. And then Glenn Loop is the organization chair, sort of their organization, the Premium Cigar Tellers of America, I think.
Well, gentlemen, welcome. I just need to tell you, we have like 5 more pages of these things to go through and we have 15 minutes. So if you could just please give us a couple minutes.
I will attempt to hustle here. I appreciate the opportunity. We're one of a very small handful of premium cigar lounges in Wyoming. You can count us on one hand, so a pretty small drop in the bucket overall for the state's revenue picture. And we have the same challenges everybody else does right now. But there's another cloud that kind of hangs over us with the tax and regulation, both at the state and the federal level, and we never know which end is up in that. We're a lot different than a lot of things that tend to bundle all tobacco together from a tax and a public health perspective. We sell premium cigars. They're most often occasionally consumed. There's a lot of camaraderie with hobbyists, and they're not inhaled. They're items that are typically at a $15 plus price point. And our average customer kind of looks like me and many of you. We tend to lean older male and certainly 100% 21 and up. And a lot of times these products that are brought into the tax discussion are called cigars with air quotes implied there, but our customers frankly wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. We don't even carry them. They're consumed similar to cigarettes, often mass produced, machine made, additives, flavors. Frankly, a lot of them are used in the consumption of marijuana, and they're sold in environments like convenience stores and gas stations where you have under 21 consumers present, arguably more youth access issues. And again, at my business and several others, you don't get through the door if you're underage. So we haven't had any youth access issues to demonstrate. And when this committee tends to apply taxes in recent history, for example, we're under a 20% tax. The vape industry, which you brought into the conversation recently, rightfully so, that has had a ton of youth access issues. And Representative Harshman has firsthand experience in the school system with that. Despite all those challenges, they're 5% behind where we are. And another illustration is the larger online retailers that are effectively the Amazons of the cigar world. They've been selling into Wyoming for years at a massively higher volume than our handful of small businesses could ever hope to. And they do so without even submitting sales tax for years, but certainly not being legally bound to the 20% OTP. So it leaves them in a much better position than it leaves local in-state businesses, and it leaves the state walking by tons more revenue than they actually collect, and leaving lots of local businesses like ours that actually hire people and inject dollars into the economy at a competitive disadvantage.
Sir, would you
Yes.
pass it up, please? I'm sorry, we're just such a tight.
Absolutely. No, I understand. We just appreciate your fair consideration of a tax cap, which has been applied in many other states, as Representative Gray mentioned. And again, it just provides a little bit of relief for our product category that's quite different than several others, I think, that are considered.
Thank you.
Thank
sir.
you.
The other gentleman.
I'll very quickly say, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we've got model legislation for you to review from 15 states. We've got revenue models that we are convinced could help Wyoming with revenue capture, especially on the sales tax front. This is a model that's worked in numerous states throughout the country. There's 5 more states with pending legislation. We think it's an opportunity for the committee, for the legislature, to assist less than a dozen Wyoming-based small businesses. And we look forward to providing that data to substantiate this to the committee.
Thank you, sir. Questions for the gentleman? Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate it. Anybody else on this topic? Okay, next topic is just, we tabled a lot of bills during the interim. We said we were tabling to the next interim. So those are still out there. They involved exemptions. There was a couple on looking at different taxes, so they're still out there. The next topic is when we started into last year, which was just a discussion of the whole electricity situation and how Wyoming is shifting from fossil fuel-based electricity production to renewables, possibly nuclear, possibly pumped hydro, and how does our revenue stream get protected as we go forward? Is it worth thinking about? It's complicated. The bill on nuclear waste storage and the nuclear power plant, they got rid of taxes on that. And we tried to put the tax back on in the Senate. So that's a non-revenue stream. It's something to think about. So that's that one. Anybody want to comment on that? Okay. Review of governmental tax exemptions. This is the one, I don't know who was on the committee a couple of years ago, but Ms. Henson had developed a presentation about governmental tax exemptions. And Ms. Henson, could you just maybe give us 2 minutes about the flavor of that? The Constitution says that we're not supposed to tax government property, but some activities of government activities are well within the realm of the private sector. And that's what this is about. So Ms. Henson.
Mr. Chairman, Brenda Henson, Director of Department of Revenue. As you stated, our Constitution requires that property that is owned by the government that is primarily used for a governmental purpose shall be exempt from property taxation. Unfortunately, there are not clear guidelines or definitions indicating what is a governmental purpose. And as the public continues to look for various services that maybe were not in the realm of government historically, this really becomes a question. And we've had some case law that has been established, but it's still, it's like we're taking a bite out of it. Okay, we've got case law that daycares are not a governmental purpose, but it only addresses daycares. And so perhaps we can dust off that presentation that I put together that looked at how some other states look at that, some other definitions, basically asking this body, the legislature, to tell Wyomingites, what do you believe is a governmental purpose? We're not saying that government can't own those properties. We're just saying that perhaps they're exempt from property taxation if they meet this criteria. Short and sweet.
It was very good. Thank you, Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Henson, would you think the yellow pages would be a good place to look for what's private sector and what's not?
Ms. Henson.
Well, Mr. Chairman, or Senator, having been a prior assessor, it's interesting that basically case law dictates that if the government owns property, that the presumption is that it's exempt from property taxation. Now, if private sector owns property, the presumption is it's taxable. That's a huge difference when you're a county assessor trying to make that decision on the exemption status. So again, I agree with you that the yellow pages, but I can give you numerous examples of shooting ranges, golf courses, numerous things that you see in private sector and you also see in the governmental sector. And again, we're not saying government can't do these things in this topic. We're just saying, should they be paying property taxes just like the private sector business down the street?
Just
who's that? Representative?
quick question. So was this the one that the airport operators, association with hangars and the rest of it?
Potential.
So I would be fine with the topic if we can leave our airports out of the conversation.
So, well, this is just it. If we look into this topic, anything ought to be on the table. This topic didn't go anywhere a couple of years ago. I mean, we couldn't even get housing owned by hospitals, private houses out of this. So I doubt if it would go anywhere, but honestly, it bears looking at.
Mr. Chairman, it's very far reaching.
Yeah.
And I believe that the reason it didn't go very far is because, first of all, it's not administered consistently across the state because we don't really have guidance. And there are going to be winners and losers.
Anyway, I'd hate to exclude anything, but there's a good case to be made, and they will make the case about airports, I'm sure. And hospitals will make their case, and it'll be on and on and on. Okay, next one, Representative Gray. Distribution of existing revenue streams and the possibility of using existing LSRA flows for investment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first one is sort of just the distribution. I forgot what the statute was, how often we're statutorily mandated to look at that. I think there's a way of writing the bill that came out of here that did fail in the House on introduction. I think there's a way of writing it that it could pass. And I've talked about that on amendments. So maybe we revisit that, maybe not. The second point is more of the new topic, which is I'm really passionate about us moving to investing LISRA once it hits a certain amount, once it goes over that amount, using that excess fund to do that. And I think we get too into this PWMTF discussion and we can't claw that back. But LISRA, if we invested, we can claw back in a cash crunch. It would require a 2/3 vote, as I understand it from LSO, to get that through. But I'd really like to have a committee discussion on it. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else on this topic? Mr. Co-Chairman.
Are you, Representative Gray, referring to investing part of the LISRA in like Amendment A? 2/3 vote?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Have we had that vote already, allowed some of it? I can't
We
remember.
allowed it, but the treasurer doesn't do it a ton. And
Yeah.
maybe we bring him in to talk a little about why. But what I'd like to do is say, once it hits a certain amount, that excess must be invested either like Pool A or the PWMTF.
I think this would be good.
What's the chairman for around here? It's okay.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
Sorry.
That's
Gosh,
all right.
my apologies.
It's
Mr.
okay.
Chairman, I think this would be good just for education for us members to kind of, just on the LSRA, I mean, I call it the hardest working account in Wyoming because there's a lot of other statutes passed that say the LSRA is the backup. Right, from bonding to schools, of course, to a lot. And so it'd be good to kind of review that, I think.
Okay, anybody on that? Next topic is 988 Suicide Lifeline Funding. Senator Baldwin.
And I will just hand that off to Ms. Semino here, who can tell you more briefly than I can what that's all about. Go ahead.
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm actually going to hand it off to Andy Somerville, who is on Zoom.
Okay.
And
Ms.
she's with
Somerville, can we
WAMSAC.
get you up? You guys have her? It's like on the Enterprise when you're like trying to bring the teleportation in, you know.
Beam me up, Scotty.
Okay,
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
go ahead.
Andy Somerville, Executive Director for WAMSAC, those are your community mental health centers. Very briefly, this, in speaking with a lot of members, this recommendation has been made to bring this topic to your committee, which I know might not seem like a natural fit, but I think it is. 988, the 988 Designation Act was signed in October of 2020. That is what the Suicide Lifeline will change over to on July 1 of 2022. With the generosity of the legislature, we have acquired approximately 2 years worth of funding to operate that 24/7. So we have 2 years to figure out how we're going to operate that sustainably going forward. In that legislation, the federal government provides us with one option in their toolbox, which is to assess a fee similar to 911, would be a 988 fee on telephone bills. In terms of trying to put together a sustainable package for how we're going to fund this in the future, we need to bring this to the committee and have a discussion about the willingness to pursue that particular funding source. And I would just add, in terms of this committee, although it is the Revenue Committee, the good chairman from Labor Health sits there, as well as several other members that are former Labor Health members. And so I believe the knowledge base in the committee is there. I'd stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Thank you. Mr. Odokoven. We're down to like 2 minutes. We got one more topic and open it up for public discussion. So make it quick.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Byron Odekoven again, the Executive Director for the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, rising in support of the topic, and to suggest that it also needs to be a very broad topic. The federal government is mandating 988 with a lot of additional issues besides suicide and how to pay for it. So I think we as a state need to get a grip on what that mandate is and how appropriate it is for Wyoming and how we will handle that mandate or not, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Odokoven. Questions for Mr. Odokoven? Thank you, Mr. Odokoven. The next topic for our discussion is Medicaid expansion. I'm not sure if we even need to discuss it, but it's on here. If we have the votes, we could move it forward. So, discussion. Let's, Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sincerely say that this belongs in labor. Looking at a program like this as a revenue producer, it's kind of sickening. So we shouldn't be having this type of topic in here. We have co-signers on the previous bills. And so it's kind of it's already set on how the vote's going to go. And that's not right either. So I think it should stay in labor where it belongs.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, how about people out in the audience weigh in on this topic, and then please let's open it up to any topic you want to talk to us about, but be as brief as you possibly can. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jan Cartwright, representing Healthy Wyoming. I would suggest that this is a bill for revenue simply because you've already put a lot of work into it. I appreciate the committee's consideration of this, and I would say that this is always needing to be updated. This is a tax-free way to raise revenue, as this committee has discussed. And I think that there's other constituent groups that should be considered who would benefit, not only the state budget, but individuals who would benefit. So I think that you don't have to restudy it, but I do think that there's enough going on that it would merit a continuing discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Cartwright. Anybody else? Who else like to? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lindsay Semino with the Wyoming Counseling Association. I would like to echo the support of continuing to study this within revenue as opposed to labor and health. Medicaid expansion is a funding source, and though it will fund a lot of our healthcare systems within the state of Wyoming, it is still at its base a financial bill. And so I would encourage it to stay in revenue as opposed to moving in labor, and we support this going forward into the interim.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right, how about anybody want to address us on any topic? Mr. Downing, are you coming up or running back? Okay. You guys, we're due back in the Senate. I don't think actually anything's going to happen. And so if the senators would remain for just a minute, because I don't think anything will actually happen on the floor that we'll miss. I would like to we're going to recognize our very able Kim Lovett, who came from the Department of Revenue to staff the Senate Revenue Committee. So with that, let's get some pictures. Yeah.
Hey, and we're